A journey of redemption and love. What would you do if you had everything the world admires, money, success, and power, but still felt empty inside? Billionaire's shocking secret to finding peace takes us on a deeply emotional journey where Henry Walker, a man at the peak of wealth, discovers that life's greatest treasures cannot be bought. Through unexpected connections, heartfelt challenges, and a library at the heart of a small town, Henry confronts his past, rebuilds trust, and finds love in the most surprising places. But can he truly let go of his old life to embrace a new beginning, or will the weight of his mistakes keep him trapped? Stay with us as we uncover the powerful lessons of redemption, community, and the courage to start over. This is more than just a story. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. And if stories like this inspire you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more tales that warm the heart and uplift the soul. By subscribing, you'll join a community that believes in the beauty of second chances. Click that notification bell so you won't miss a single chapter of this transformative journey. Now let's dive into Billionaire's shocking secret to finding peace. You won't want to miss a moment. Henry Walker's mansion sat on the outskirts of the city, a fortress of glass and steel perched high above the hustle and bustle below. The sprawling estate was a marvel of modern architecture, its towering walls reflecting the grandeur of the man who owned it. Yet, for all its brilliance, it was eerily silent. Henry stood by the massive floor-to-ceiling window in his study, staring out at the city skyline that had once inspired him. Now it only seemed distant, as if it belonged to a world he no longer recognized. The room, once filled with the sound of Evelyn's laughter, felt colder than ever. Even the sleek leather armchairs and meticulously curated bookshelves seemed lifeless without her presence. The ticking of the grandfather clock echoed faintly, marking time in a way that reminded Henry of its relentless march. He shifted his gaze to a photo on his desk, a candid shot of Evelyn laughing as she tended to the garden. Her bright smile lit up the image, a painful contrast to the emptiness he felt now. Henry's thoughts drifted, and with them came a flood of memories. Evelyn had been his anchor, his reminder of life beyond the cutthroat world of business. They had met when he was just starting out, a driven entrepreneur with big dreams. She was his balance, urging him to slow down and savor the little moments. But Henry hadn't listened. Just one more project, he would say, promising that after the next deal or the next product launch, he would take a step back. That promise remained unfulfilled the day Evelyn's life was cut short by a car accident on a rainy evening. The memory of that night haunted him. He had been in a meeting, finalizing details for a merger, when the call came. The hospital had tried everything, but the injuries were too severe. By the time he arrived, it was too late. Henry gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles turning white. Guilt twisted inside him, a constant reminder of the time he could never get back. The day dragged on, and Henry forced himself to attend a board meeting. The video conference was filled with familiar faces, most of them wearing polite but concerned expressions. Henry, one of the board members, began cautiously, "We've noticed a significant decline in your engagement with the company's operations. This can't go on. The board is growing uneasy." "Uneasy?" Henry repeated, his tone distant. "What exactly are you implying?" Another member chimed in, her voice firm. "There's talk of a leadership challenge. You've built this company into an empire, but your absence has not gone unnoticed. If you're not willing to step up—" "Enough," Henry interrupted, his voice sharp for the first time. "The company is fine." But even as he said the words, he knew they rang hollow. The company wasn't fine, and neither was he. The meeting ended, and Henry remained in his chair, staring blankly at the screen. They were right. His passion for the business had faded, just as everything else in his life had. Later that evening, Henry found himself pacing the halls of his mansion. The vast corridors, once symbols of achievement, now felt oppressive. He wandered aimlessly until he stopped outside Evelyn's room. The door creaked slightly as he pushed it open. The room had been untouched since her death. Her favorite chair still sat by the window, draped with the quilt she had once worked on. A faint trace of her perfume lingered in the air. Henry sank into the chair, running a hand over the worn fabric. "I'm sorry," he whispered into the stillness. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours. Time had a way of losing meaning here. Finally, Henry stood and grabbed his car keys. He needed to get out. Without a destination in mind, he drove through the city and out into the countryside. The hum of the engine and the rhythmic motion of the tires on the road were oddly soothing. He passed rows of houses, their warm lights glowing against the encroaching dusk. As Henry turned down a quiet street in a small town, something caught his attention. A modest building with warm light spilling out of its windows. A hand-painted sign read, "Community Library." Through the glass, he saw children gathered around a woman with a book in hand. Their laughter, faint but distinct, drifted into the night air. The scene was simple, yet it stirred something in him. A curiosity, or perhaps a yearning. Henry parked his car a short distance away, the engine cutting off with a soft hum. He sat in the driver's seat, watching the small but vibrant scene unfold. For the first time in what felt like years, he felt drawn to something. The sound of laughter lingered in Henry's mind as he stepped out of the car. What was it about this small, unassuming place that felt so inviting? With a hesitant step, he made his way toward the library's door, unaware that this moment would mark the beginning of a journey that would change everything. The soft laughter of children spilled out into the quiet street, carried on the cool evening breeze. Henry Walker stood beside his car, his hand resting lightly on the door handle as he stared at the modest building before him. The library was small, its brick exterior weathered but inviting. Warm light streamed from the windows, painting golden rectangles on the sidewalk outside. For a moment, Henry hesitated. The sharp contrast between the library's cozy charm and the sterile grandeur of his own home felt almost overwhelming. The sounds of laughter and a woman's clear, cheerful voice tugged at something buried deep within him. Taking a steadying breath, he pushed open the door. The scent of aged paper and polished wood enveloped him as he stepped inside. It was a scent he hadn't encountered in years, nostalgic, yet unfamiliar. He paused just beyond the threshold, unsure of where to go or what to do. At the far end of the room, a small group of children sat cross-legged on a colourful rug, their wide eyes fixed on the woman seated before them. Claire Sutton, the librarian, held a well-worn storybook in her hands, her voice animated as she brought the tale to life. She exuded a natural warmth that drew Henry's attention instantly. And so the little fox learned that the greatest treasures weren't found in gold or jewels, Claire said, her voice dropping to a dramatic whisper, but in the friends who stood by him through every adventure. The children erupted into applause, their delighted giggles echoing through the space. Claire laughed along with them, her face lighting up with genuine joy. Her energy filled the room, making it feel alive in a way Henry hadn't experienced in years. From where he stood, Henry found himself captivated. He wasn't sure if it was her voice, her presence, or the way the children seemed to orbit around her like she was the center of their universe. Whatever it was, it made him linger longer than he intended. As the children dispersed, Claire rose to her feet, stretching slightly before moving toward the circulation desk. Henry noticed how the library seemed to reflect her personality. Organized, yet inviting, with handwritten signs pointing to different sections and small potted plants adding touches of green. "Thank you for staying late again, Claire," an elderly volunteer said as she handed Claire a stack of returned books. "I know it's been a lot lately." "It's no trouble at all, Margaret," Claire replied with a smile. "This place means too much to let it fall apart." Henry caught the shift in her tone, a note of worry beneath the cheerfulness. Margaret sighed, nodding toward a box of supplies marked donations. "I just wish more people knew how much we need the funding," Margaret said. "It's not easy keeping the doors open." Henry's curiosity deepened. He glanced around, noticing signs of wear: scuffed floors, aging furniture, shelves sagging slightly under the weight of books. Despite its charm, the library bore the marks of a place struggling to survive. Gathering his courage, Henry approached the desk. Claire looked up, her expression polite but wary as she studied the stranger before her. "Evening," Henry began, his voice stiff with unfamiliarity. "I, happened to pass by and noticed the energy here. It's impressive." Claire smiled faintly. "It's our little corner of the world. Glad you could stop in." Henry nodded, glancing down at the donation box. "I overheard you talking about funding. I'd like to help. Money's not an issue." Claire's smile froze slightly, her eyes narrowing with a mix of surprise and suspicion. "That's kind of you," she said, carefully measured. "But we rely on support from the community. It's not just about the money. It's about the people who make this place what it is." Henry blinked, caught off guard. Most people jumped at the chance to take what he offered, yet here she was, politely refusing. "It's not every day someone turns down help," he remarked. "It's not every day someone offers it," Claire countered, her tone light but firm. "We're proud of what we've built here, and we want it to reflect the heart of the community, not just the size of a donation." For the first time in years, Henry felt a flicker of respect for someone who didn't see him as just a billionaire with an open checkbook. The conversation continued briefly, shifting to lighter topics as Claire explained the library's mission and the joy it brought to the town. Henry listened more than he spoke, finding himself drawn to her enthusiasm and the way she seemed to believe in what she did. "I should let you get back to your evening," Claire said finally, sensing his hesitation to leave. "But feel free to stop by any time." Henry nodded, glancing around once more before stepping outside. The crisp night air greeted him, but it felt less heavy now. He turned back toward the library, watching as Claire tidied up, her movements purposeful and unhurried. For the first time in years, Henry felt something stir within him, something that whispered there might be more to life than what he'd built in his mansion. As the warm glow of the library lights reflected in his rearview mirror, he resolved to return, even if he didn't fully understand why. The next evening, Henry Walker found himself standing in front of the small library once again. The sound of laughter and muffled conversations seeped through the walls, mingling with the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. The library's warm glow contrasted sharply with the growing dusk, drawing him in like a moth to a flame. This time, he didn't hesitate. Henry pushed the door open and stepped inside, greeted once more by the familiar scent of aged books and polished wood. A few patrons looked up, nodded politely, and returned to their activities. No one seemed to care that a billionaire stood among them, and for once, Henry felt a strange sense of relief. Henry wandered toward the back of the room, where Claire was rearranging a shelf of picture books. She turned at the sound of his footsteps and offered a welcoming smile. "Back so soon," she teased lightly. "I figured I'd see if you had more of that energy," he replied, his tone dry but not unkind. Claire laughed softly and gestured toward a pile of books stacked precariously on a nearby table. "If you're looking to be useful, we could always use an extra hand." Henry hesitated for only a moment before rolling up his sleeves. "Where do I start?" Over the next hour, Henry found himself repairing a wobbly chair with an old toolbox Claire had produced. He worked silently, listening to the chatter around him. A group of teens gathered at a table, collaborating on a school project. An elderly couple sat side by side, flipping through photo albums they'd borrowed from the library's archives. Nearby, a young boy pored over a book, utterly absorbed. For the first time in years, Henry felt a sense of calm, not the manufactured kind that came from luxury vacations or spa treatments, but something deeper, something real. As the evening wore on and the library grew quieter, Claire approached Henry with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. She sat across from him at a small table, the dim overhead light casting a warm glow. "You're not bad with a wrench," she remarked, gesturing toward the now sturdy chair. Henry allowed a faint smile. "I had some practice growing up. My father believed in fixing things yourself, even when you could afford not to." Claire tilted her head, intrigued. "That's not something I'd expect from a man like you." Henry shrugged, steering the conversation away from himself. "And you? What keeps you here, running this place?" Her smile faltered slightly, and she glanced down at her coffee. "It's complicated." Henry waited, sensing there was more. "My sister Lily was the one who really loved books," Claire began softly. "She used to spend hours in libraries, losing herself in stories. When we were kids, I thought it was silly. I was the practical, and always focused on what came next. But then," she paused, taking a shaky breath, "she died in a car accident when she was 22. It was sudden, and it broke my family. For a long time, I didn't know how to deal with it." Henry leaned forward slightly, her words striking an all-too-familiar chord. "And the library?" he prompted gently. "It saved me," Claire admitted, her voice steadier now. "It reminded me of her, of the joy she found in stories. Working here, creating a space where others can find that same joy. It's my way of keeping her memory alive." Henry nodded, his throat tight. He didn't speak of Evelyn, but Claire's story lingered with him, a quiet reminder of his own unresolved grief. As Henry helped Claire close up for the night, a voice called out from the doorway. "Don't forget this, dear," said an elderly woman holding a stack of books. Her grey hair was pinned neatly, and her glasses rested low on her nose. "Thank you, Margaret," Claire replied warmly. "Henry, this is Margaret. She's been volunteering here for over 20 years. Margaret's eyes twinkled as she looked him up and down. "So, you're the mystery man Claire mentioned. It's about time we got some new blood in here." Henry chuckled lightly, feeling surprisingly at ease under her sharp gaze. Nearby, a young boy no older than 10 shuffled forward, clutching a battered book. His clothes were clean, but clearly second-hand, and his sneakers had seen better days. "That's Tommy," Claire explained softly. "He practically lives here. He's got a tough situation at home, but he's smart as a whip and loves reading." Tommy glanced up at Henry, his expression guarded but curious. "You like books?" he asked abruptly. Henry hesitated before nodding. "I used to. It's been a while." The boy studied him for a moment before holding out his book. "You should. Try this one. It's good." Henry took the book, startled by the simple gesture. "Thanks, Tommy, I'll take a look." As Henry drove home that night, the book Tommy had given him rested on the passenger seat, its cover worn but well-loved. The boy's note inside was simple. "Maybe you'll like this one too." Henry couldn't remember the last time someone had offered him something so freely, without expectation. It was a small thing, but it stayed with him. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something he couldn't quite name. Perhaps it was curiosity, or perhaps it was the faintest hint of belonging. The library wasn't just a building, filled with books. It was a lifeline, a place where people like Claire, Margaret, and Tommy found purpose and connection. And without fully understanding why, Henry knew he'd be back. The sharp ring of Henry Walker's phone echoed through his office, pulling him away from the financial report he wasn't really reading. He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Walker," he said curtly. "Henry, it's David," came. The voice of his longtime colleague and board member. "We need to talk." Henry sighed. He already knew where this conversation was heading. "We've been patient," David continued, his tone carefully measured. "But the board is growing restless. Your absence is starting to affect investor confidence. If you don't step back into a leadership role soon, there's going to be a push for a change." Henry leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting to the city skyline beyond the window. The words felt distant, almost irrelevant, but he couldn't ignore the weight behind them. "Are you saying the board is planning to replace me?" he asked, his voice low. "They're considering it," David admitted. "And honestly, Henry, they have a point. You've been disengaged for months. If you don't show them you're still invested in the company, they'll have no choice." Henry ended the call without promising anything. As he sat in the silence of his office, he realized the world he had built was beginning to slip from his grasp. Meanwhile, at the library, Claire Sutton was shelving a new stack of donated books when Margaret approached her, holding a newspaper. "Have you seen this?" Margaret asked, her brow furrowed. Claire glanced at the paper, her curiosity piqued. The headline read, "Reclusive tech billionaire Henry Walker seen in local town." Beneath it was a grainy photo of Henry stepping out of his car, the library visible in the background. For a moment Claire stared at the image, her mind racing. Memories of her recent conversations with Henry flooded back. The way he avoided sharing personal details, his quiet demeanor, his vague comments about helping out. "Billionaire?" she murmured, the word feeling foreign on her tongue. Margaret tilted her head. "You didn't know?" Claire shook her head, a growing sense of unease settling in. She couldn't help but feel betrayed, as though Henry's presence at the library had been some kind of elaborate pretense. Later that evening, Henry returned to the library, hoping to find solace in its familiar warmth. But as soon as he stepped inside, he knew something was wrong. Claire was standing by the circulation desk, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. "Claire," he began, but she cut him off. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice steady but sharp. Henry frowned. "Tell you what?" "That you're Henry Walker, the Henry Walker. Billionaire tech mogul, philanthropist, and apparently part-time handyman," she said, the sarcasm laced with anger. Henry opened his mouth to respond, but hesitated. He hadn't lied exactly, but he hadn't been honest either. "I didn't think it mattered," he said finally. Claire let out a short, humorless laugh. "Didn't matter? Henry, you've been here almost every day, acting like you're just some guy passing through, and now I find out you're—" She gestured vaguely, struggling to find the words. "You're practically a celebrity." "I'm not here as a billionaire," Henry said, his tone defensive. "I came because—" "Because why?" Claire interrupted. "Because you needed a distraction, because you wanted to play hero and throw some money at a small-town library to make yourself feel better." Her words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they held a kernel of truth Henry hadn't yet admitted to himself. "It's not like that," he said quietly, but the conviction in his voice wavered. Claire shook her head, her disappointment evident. I thought you actually cared about this place, about the people here, but now I don't know if I can trust anything you've said." With that, she turned and walked toward the back of the library, leaving Henry standing alone. For a long moment, he didn't move. The soft hum of the overhead lights and the faint rustle of pages being turned were the only sounds in the empty space. Henry sat down at one of the tables, staring at his hands. Her words echoed in his mind. "I don't know if I can trust you." He thought about Evelyn and the promises he had made to her, the promises he hadn't kept. He thought about the countless moments he had let slip away, too caught up in his work to realize what truly mattered. Now, it seemed, he was repeating the same mistakes. As Henry left the library that night, the warmth and laughter he had grown to associate with the place felt like a distant memory. He glanced back at the building one last time, the light spilling onto the sidewalk now seeming dimmer. He had wanted to find peace, but instead he had only brought more conflict. In the solitude of his car, Henry gripped the steering wheel, his thoughts racing. For the first time in years, he felt truly unsure of himself. Could he bridge the gap he had created, or was it already too late? Henry Walker sat in his dimly lit study, the faint hum of his laptop the only sound in the room. The confrontation with Claire had left a bitter taste in his mouth, but more than that, it had left him with questions about himself, about why. He kept returning to the library and about why her opinion mattered so much. Determined to make amends, Henry began working on an idea. He couldn't undo the mistrust he'd caused, but perhaps he could help in a way that didn't draw attention to himself. After hours of research and phone calls, the plan was set: an anonymous fundraiser to support the library. He contacted local businesses and community leaders, using only his first name to remain inconspicuous. His message was simple: the library has been a cornerstone of our town. Let's ensure it thrives. On the day of the fundraiser, the library buzzed with life. Tables were set up outside, covered with baked goods, handmade crafts, and donated books for sale. Strings of lights crisscrossed above the courtyard, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere. Claire stood at the center of it all, her smile bright, but her eyes cautious. The sudden influx of support had taken her by surprise. Flyers for the event had appeared overnight, and local businesses had donated generously. "I don't know who organized this," Claire admitted to Margaret as they arranged books on a display table. "But whoever they are, they've done something incredible." Margaret gave her a knowing smile. Sometimes people show their true character through actions, not words. Throughout the day, townspeople shared stories of how the library had touched their lives. An elderly man recounted how it had been his refuge after losing his wife. A single mother spoke of the free children's programs that had kept her son engaged and learning. Henry stayed on the sidelines, quietly observing. For the first time, he saw the library not just as a building, but as a lifeline for the community. The warmth and gratitude he witnessed were unlike anything he had experienced in his sterile corporate world. Later in the afternoon, Margaret found Henry standing near the refreshments table, watching the event unfold. "Lovely turnout, isn't it?" Margaret began, her tone light but her gaze sharp. "It is," Henry replied. Margaret handed him a cup of coffee. "You know, Claire's a tough one. But tough doesn't mean unkind. She's been through her share of struggles, and she's learned to protect herself." Henry glanced at her, unsure how to respond. "She doesn't trust easily, especially when it comes to people with, let's say, complicated pasts," Margaret continued, her eyes twinkling. "But she's also the kind of person who sees the good in people if you give her a reason to." Margaret patted his arm gently before walking away, leaving Henry with her words lingering in his mind. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the crowd began to thin, Henry stayed behind to help Claire clean up. They worked in companionable silence, stacking chairs and folding tablecloths. Finally, Claire broke the quiet. "I don't know who organized this, but it was amazing. It showed me how much this library means to people." Henry hesitated before replying. "It wasn't just one person. The community came together for this." She looked at him, her expression softening. "I suppose that's what makes it special." They continued working, and for the first time since their argument, the tension between them seemed to ease. "I'm still not sure if I can trust you," Claire admitted quietly, breaking the silence. "Again. But I can see you care about this place, and that matters." Henry nodded, accepting her honesty. "I don't expect you to trust me overnight, but I'm not going anywhere. I'll prove it if you'll let me." As the last chair was stacked and the lights dimmed, Margaret approached the small group. "This event was special," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It's moments like these that remind us how important it is to stay connected. And speaking of connection," she added with a wink, "I hear there's a channel that's bringing stories like this to life. You might want to subscribe so you don't miss." What happens next? Claire chuckled softly, the tension in the air lifting just a little. You've got a point, Margaret. Sometimes the right story comes at just the right time. As the last table was packed away and the library returned to its usual calm, Henry's phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket, his brows furrowing. As he read the message, "Emergency board meeting tomorrow. Leadership challenge confirmed. We need you here." Henry's jaw tightened. The corporate world he had tried to distance himself from was closing in, threatening to pull him back into its grasp. As Henry stood in the fading glow of the library's lights, he realized the stakes were higher than ever. Not only was he fighting for a place in the community and a chance to rebuild trust with Claire, but now he had to face the possibility of losing everything he had built professionally. The faint hum of the copier was the only sound in the library's office as Claire Sutton stared at the letter in her hand. Her stomach churned as her eyes scanned the words for the 5th time. Notice of closure. Code violations. The letter outlined a long list of structural issues: faulty wiring, a leaking roof, outdated safety systems. Repairs would cost tens of thousands of dollars, far beyond the library's meager budget. Claire clenched her jaw, feeling the weight of the community's reliance on the library pressing down on her. Margaret entered the office, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced with a concerned frown. "I take it that letter isn't good news," she said gently. "It's worse than I thought," Claire admitted. "If we don't fix these issues, they'll shut us down." The idea of the library closing felt like a knife to her heart. This wasn't just a building, it was the heart of the town, a place where people found comfort, learning, and connection. Henry arrived at the library later that afternoon, sensing the tension in the air. Claire was at the front desk, flipping through a binder of budget reports with a furrowed brow. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone careful. Claire glanced up, hesitated, then handed him the letter. As Henry read it, his expression darkened. "This is serious," he said, looking back at her. "How much will the repairs cost?" "Too much," Claire replied tersely. "But we'll figure it out. We always do." Henry frowned. "You don't have to do this alone. Let me help." "No." Claire's voice was firm, cutting him off. "This is a community effort, not something that can be fixed by a blank check." "I'm not trying to undermine you," Henry said, struggling to keep his frustration in check. "I just want to—" "To what?" Claire interrupted, her eyes flashing. "To swoop in and save the day. That's not how this works, Henry." The sharpness in her tone stung, but Henry bit back his retort. He didn't want to make things worse, but every attempt to help seemed to push Claire further away. That evening, Henry returned to his mansion, where a notification on his phone reminded him of the emergency board meeting scheduled for the next morning. He sighed heavily, sinking into the leather chair in his study. The meeting was everything he expected and dreaded. The board's faces filled the screen of his laptop, their expressions ranging from concern to impatience. Henry, David, his longtime colleague, began, "This has gone on long enough. Your absence is jeopardizing the company's future. Investors are losing confidence, and frankly, so is the board. You need to decide," another member chimed in. "Are you with us or not? Because if you're not, we'll find someone who is." Henry leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. The corporate world had always been his domain, but for the first time, he found himself questioning if it was still where he belonged. The next morning, as Claire reviewed the library's budget, a curious note caught her eye, a small but consistent monthly donation marked as anonymous. She cross-referenced it with other records and discovered similar payments, all from the same unnamed source. Her heart sank as realization dawned. There was only one person who could be behind it. Later that day, when Henry arrived at the library, Claire was waiting for him. She held up a printout of the financial records, her expression unreadable. "This is you, isn't it?" she asked, her voice calm but with an edge. Henry glanced at the papers and nodded slowly. Yes, Claire exhaled sharply, shaking her head. Why? Why would you go behind my back like this? I wasn't trying to go behind your back, Henry said, his tone defensive. I just wanted to help without making things harder for you. Harder, Claire repeated, her voice rising. Do you even understand how much you've undermined everything we're trying to do here? This library isn't about handouts. It's about people coming together to support something they believe in, and I just wanted to make things better, Henry interrupted, his frustration bubbling over. But it seems like, no matter what I do, it's never enough for you. The tension between them snapped, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Claire's hands trembled as she folded the papers and set them on the desk. You don't get it, do you? She said softly, her voice heavy with disappointment. This isn't just about money. It's about trust. And right now, I don't know if I can trust you. Her words hit Henry harder than he expected. Before he could respond, Claire turned and walked out, leaving him standing alone in the middle of the library. Rain began to fall as Henry stepped outside, the cool droplets soaking through his shirt. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty street, wondering if he was destined to repeat the same mistakes, pushing people away even when he was trying to help. As the rain poured around him, Henry realized he was standing at a crossroads. If he didn't find a way to rebuild the trust he had broken, he might lose the library and Claire forever. The boardroom was silent as Henry Walker stood at the head of the table. He looked out at the familiar faces of his colleagues, each one reflecting a mix of skepticism and impatience. For years, this room had been the center of his world, the place where decisions worth millions, sometimes billions, were made. But today it felt like a cage. This company has been my life's work, Henry began, his voice steady but resolute. It's more than just a business to me, it's a legacy. But lately, I've come to realize that I've allowed it to consume me at the expense of everything else. A murmur rippled through the room as the board members exchanged puzzled glances. David, his longtime ally, leaned forward, his brow furrowed. What are you saying, Henry? David asked cautiously. I'm saying that I'm stepping down as CEO, Henry announced. His words met with a stunned silence. The room erupted into whispers and exclamations, but Henry stood firm, letting the chaos settle before continuing. I've lost too much already. Time, relationships, the chance to truly live. I can't let that happen anymore. It's time for me to step away and focus on what really matters. The media quickly caught wind of his announcement, and within hours, headlines blared. Tech mogul Henry Walker resigns in shocking move. Reactions were mixed, with some praising his decision as courageous and others labeling it as reckless. But for the first time in years, Henry felt free. At the library, Claire sat in the quiet stillness of her office, staring at the stacks of budget reports and repair estimates that seemed to mock her efforts. The news of Henry's resignation had reached her through a small-town paper, and she couldn't shake the pang of guilt it stirred. She thought back to Margaret's words from the fundraiser. Sometimes people show their true character through actions, not words. Henry had been trying to show her, but her own fears had blinded her to his sincerity. Margaret entered the room, a knowing smile on her face. Still brooding, she teased gently. Claire sighed. I don't know if I made a mistake. Margaret chuckled softly. Mistakes are how we learn, dear. But don't let fear keep you from something good. The question is, what are you going to do about it now? Later, Tommy approached Claire with a hand-drawn card. On the front, in his messy handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for making this place special." Inside was a simple message. I don't want to lose the library. We need you. Claire felt tears prick her eyes as she held the card. She realized that holding on to her fears of Henry of failure, of vulnerability, was only hurting the very people she wanted to protect. News of the library's potential closure spread quickly, and the town responded with an outpouring of support. Volunteers organized bake sales, car washes, and donation drives, filling the library courtyard with activity and hope. Henry, now free from the demands of his company, threw himself into the effort. He helped set up tables, carried supplies, and even joined the children in crafting handmade "Save Our Library" signs. One afternoon, as Henry hammered nails into a banner, an elderly man approached him. "You're Henry Walker, aren't you?" the man asked, his tone not accusatory but curious. "I am," Henry replied, bracing himself for the judgment he'd grown accustomed to. The man smiled. "I don't care how much money you have. You're here and you're helping. That's what matters." Henry nodded, the man's words resonating deeply. As the final fundraiser event wound down, Henry found Claire sitting on the library steps, her shoulders slumped from exhaustion. He hesitated for a moment before joining her, sitting a respectful distance away. "Claire," he began, his voice hesitant, "I know I've made mistakes. I've spent so much of my life hiding behind money and success because I didn't know how to face anything else, but I want to change. I want to do better." Claire looked at him, her expression conflicted but softening. "I've been scared too," she admitted. "Scared to trust, scared to let anyone in. Losing my sister taught me how fragile things are, and I guess I thought keeping people at arm's length was the only way to protect myself." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their words settling between them. Finally, Claire turned to him. "But maybe it's time to stop being so afraid." Henry met her gaze, and for the first time he felt a flicker of hope. The next morning, as the townspeople counted the funds raised, the reality set in. They were still short of the amount needed to cover the library's repairs. Despite all their efforts, it wasn't enough. Henry stood in the library's quiet main room, staring at the donation tally. The laughter and hope of the past few days now seemed distant, replaced by the cold reality of numbers. Claire approached him, her expression a mix of determination and sadness. "We'll figure it out," she said softly. "We always do." But Henry wasn't so sure. He had sacrificed his career, poured his time and energy into this place, and still, it might not be enough. As he looked around the room, he wondered, had he truly done all he could, or was there more he was meant to give? As Henry stared at the donation ledger, a question burned in his mind. Was this the end, or was it just the beginning of a greater sacrifice? The library's main room was uncharacteristically quiet. Claire Sutton stood by the donation board, her fingers tracing the edge of the total figure. Despite their best efforts, they had fallen short. The number stared back at her like a reminder of their failure. Henry entered the room, his usual measured stride a little slower. He stopped beside Claire, glancing at the board. "We're close," he said softly, though the gap was unmistakable. They needed several thousand more dollars to cover the cost of repairs. "Close isn't enough," Claire replied, her voice heavy with frustration. She crossed her arms, her gaze dropping to the floor. "The library can't survive on almost." Henry hesitated, then took a breath. "There's still a way," he began cautiously. "I have contacts, people who owe me favors. If I reach out, we could bridge the gap. Contractors, suppliers, I could pull some strings." Claire turned to him, her expression conflicted. "Henry, we've been through this. This isn't just about fixing the building. It's about the community coming together to save something they care about." "I understand that," he said, meeting her eyes. "But sometimes accepting help isn't a sign of failure. It's what keeps things moving forward." The next morning, Henry sat in his study, a notebook filled with names and numbers in front of him. It had been years since he'd reached out to some of these contacts, But if it could save the library, he was willing to try. His first call was to a former contractor who had overseen projects for his company. The man, after some initial skepticism, agreed to donate materials for the library's roof repairs. A supplier he'd worked with promised discounted safety equipment, and an architect he knew offered to review the building's plans pro bono. As the day went on, Henry's phone became a lifeline for the library. He carefully coordinated these contributions with Claire's plans, ensuring that the community remained involved. Local volunteers would still handle painting and landscaping, while the professionals would tackle the more technical repairs. By evening, Henry felt a sense of accomplishment he hadn't known in years. This wasn't about leveraging power or influence. It was about using resources for something meaningful. Claire arrived at the library early the next day, surprised to see Henry already there, coordinating with a contractor about roof repairs. She watched from a distance as he listened intently, taking notes and offering solutions without a hint of arrogance. Margaret appeared beside her, her eyes twinkling. "Looks like someone's working hard to make things right." Claire sighed. "He is, and I've been so focused on what I thought he was doing wrong, I didn't see what he was actually trying to do." Margaret patted her arm. "Trust is hard, dear, especially when you've been hurt before, but it's worth it." Later, that afternoon, Claire found Henry organizing paint cans in the storage room. She cleared her throat, and he looked up, surprised. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" he asked, setting the cans down. "For not giving up," Claire replied, "even when I pushed you away." Henry's gaze softened. "You had every right to. I wanted to help." Claire hesitated, then stepped closer. "And you have, more than I realized." It was a small moment, but it felt monumental. For the first time, Claire allowed herself to trust Henry, not just with the library, but with her own guarded emotions. As the days turned into weeks, the library underwent a transformation. Contractors repaired the roof and wiring, ensuring the building met modern safety standards. Volunteers painted the walls, planted flowers in the garden, and set up new shelves donated by a local carpenter. The town buzzed with excitement as the grand reopening approached. Children painted signs, local businesses donated refreshments, and even those who couldn't contribute financially offered their time and labor. Henry found himself in the middle of it all, working alongside the community. For the first time, he felt like he belonged, not because of his wealth, but because of his willingness to contribute. On the evening before the reopening, Claire and Henry stood outside the library, admiring the twinkling lights strung across its entrance. "It's beautiful," Claire murmured. "It's more than that," Henry said. "It's a second chance for all of us." Just as the two were about to head inside, Henry's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and froze. It was a call from David, his former colleague. "Henry?" David's voice crackled through the line. "We have a problem. Something's come up at the company, and we need you, urgently." Henry's jaw tightened as he ended the call. He had left that world behind, or so he thought. Now it seemed the past was reaching for him once again. As the grand reopening loomed, Henry stood at a crossroads. Would he be forced to leave the new life he was building? Or could he finally break free of the corporate ties that had defined him for so long? The morning after the call from David, Henry Walker sat in his study, staring at his phone. The weight of the decision before him was heavy, yet for the first time it didn't feel paralyzing. He scrolled through the messages from his former colleagues, each one urging him to return and save the company. The old Henry might have jumped at the opportunity to reclaim control, but now he saw it differently. What good was power if it came at the expense of everything else? Henry picked up the phone and dialed David's number. When his colleague answered, Henry's voice was calm but firm. "David, I've made my choice," he said. "I won't be coming back." David's protest was immediate, but Henry cut him off gently. "I've spent my life building something that ultimately left me empty. I won't do that again. It's time for me to focus on what truly matters." Hanging up, Henry felt a strange sense of peace. The corporate world no longer had a hold on him. For the first time in years, he felt free to truly live. The day of the library's grand reopening dawned bright and clear. The entire town seemed to be buzzing with excitement as people gathered in the newly renovated courtyard. Strings of lights hung from the trees, and tables were laden with food and drinks donated by local businesses. Claire stood near the entrance, her hands clasped tightly in front of her as she surveyed the scene. Her heart swelled with gratitude as she watched the community come together. This wasn't just a building, it was a testament to their collective effort and resilience. Henry approached her, dressed in a simple button-down shirt and slacks, a warm smile on his face. "You ready for this?" he asked. Claire exhaled, her smile softening. "I think so. I still can't believe we pulled it off." "You pulled it off," Henry corrected gently. "I just helped along the way." As the event began, Claire stepped up to the small stage set up near the entrance. Her voice wavered slightly as she addressed the crowd, but her words were heartfelt. "This library has always been more than just a place for books," she said. "It's been a refuge, a source of inspiration, and a cornerstone of our community. And today, thanks to all of you, it has a new life." The crowd erupted into applause, and Claire glanced at Henry, her expression filled with gratitude. Later, that evening, as the festivities wound down, Henry and Claire found themselves alone in the quiet library. The soft glow of the overhead lights cast a warm hue on the freshly painted walls and polished floors. "This place looks incredible," Henry said, running his hand along one of the new bookshelves. Claire nodded. "It feels like a second chance for all of us." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Claire turned to him. "Henry, I don't know what's next for us, but I'm willing to find out if you are." Henry smiled, his heart full in a way he hadn't felt in years. "I've never been more certain of anything." They shared a quiet laugh, the tension of past conflicts fading into the background. This wasn't just the beginning of a new chapter. For the library, it was the beginning of a new chapter for them, too. In the weeks that followed, the library became a vibrant hub of activity. It wasn't just a place for books anymore. It was a community center, offering classes, workshops, and events that brought people together. Margaret led a gardening club that turned the library's courtyard into a flourishing green space. Tommy, now more confident than ever, started a weekly story time for younger children, proudly sharing his favorite books. Henry found his role naturally evolving. He worked behind the scenes, organizing events and mentoring teens interested in technology. He wasn't just an observer anymore. He was part of something bigger than himself. Years later, the library's main room was filled with the sound of children's laughter. Henry and Claire sat side by side on a cushioned bench, each holding a book as a group of wide-eyed kids gathered around. "And that," Henry said, closing, "the book with a flourish is how the little fox found his greatest treasure." The children clapped and giggled, their enthusiasm filling the room. Claire leaned over, her smile radiant. "You've gotten pretty good at this," she teased. Henry chuckled. "I had a good teacher." As the children dispersed, Henry glanced around the room. The library was bustling with life, its shelves filled with books, its walls adorned with artwork created by local kids. He reached for Claire's hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "We did it," he said softly. She squeezed his hand. "No, Henry, we all did it." The story of Billionaire's shocking secret to finding peace teaches us that true wealth isn't measured by material possessions or corporate success, but by the relationships we build and the communities we nurture. Henry's journey reminds us that it's never too late to let go of past mistakes, embrace vulnerability, and choose a path that aligns with our values. Claire's story, on the other hand, highlights the power of resilience and the importance of trust. Together, their lives demonstrate that healing and renewal come not from isolation, but from collaboration, understanding, and love. At its heart, this story is a celebration of second chances, the courage to start over, and the transformative power of kindness. It encourages all of us to reflect on what truly matters and to invest in the people and places that give our lives meaning. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who might need a little inspiration today. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for more stories that touch the heart and celebrate the beauty of life's second chances. By subscribing, you'll stay connected to uplifting content like this, filled with lessons about love, community, and personal growth. Hit that notification bell so you won't miss a single moment of these meaningful journeys. Thank you so much for watching and spending your time with us. Your support means the world, and it's what keeps us inspired to create stories that matter. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people around you, and remember, it's never too late for a fresh start. See you in the next video.